the downtown historic district and ensured that new housing, street design, enhancements for park and green space were all incorporated into those plans. And we still continue to work with the city and a lot of its entities today. Doublesville is a city outside of Atlanta, Georgia, within the metro area. Again, another neighborhood that was right outside of their historic downtown area. We were able to work on 3 different plans with this city. We did a livable centers initiative plan, which is kind of focused around transportation. They had a new highway coming through. So when you think of not displacement due to infrastructure projects, but just the impact of infrastructure projects such as a highway coming close to a neighborhood can have, we were able to look at the opportunities that existed around that new transportation option coming through the neighborhood and how that would impact, because it was moving a lot of traffic from the center of a neighborhood to right outside it, but it was created opportunity to create more of a main street or have little nodes of commercial retail that was neighborhood scale. So even though it was moving some traffic out of it, it was still allowing new opportunities because a lot of times the traffic that was coming through their community was just pass-through traffic. They weren't stopping, contributing to the neighborhood. So we were looking at the opportunity of how do we bring people in and actually build off of this new, because they were adjacent to downtown, how do we bring people in and build off of this new opportunity? Houston, we worked in the historic third ward right off Emancipation Avenue. They had a new park that was revitalized, like over $1 million. They had a natatorium, a lot of amenities, and this one was unique because we weren't working directly with the city. We were working more with a nonprofit and other small businesses and stakeholders within the community. So the city was partnering with them, but we were working more kind of in a grassroots effort. And this was really great because we were able to work with the people that were implementing the changes or implementing projects directly. So we worked with a nonprofit, a small business owner, or a small business with a kind of a community developer. So they had land, they had assemblages, and they were looking at places where they could build new infill housing that was going to retain the character and the people and the community that they knew and had been working in all along. So that was very fortunate, and we continue to work with them also. And lastly, Spartanburg, South Carolina. This one kind of reminds me a little bit of TRNG in the Georgetown area because it's a very tight-knit neighborhood. There was a housing project that was there for a while. People started leaving, and then kids growing up, going off to college, but they weren't coming back. So you had an older neighborhood who owned homes. You had a decent renter population. But there was a lot of opportunity to kind of bring some revitalization back to that neighborhood, and that one we wrapped up last year, but again, we've been lucky to be able to continue to work with them. One thing that's all in common with these, each one of these are minority majority communities. So these are all communities of color in some form or fashion. And it's not something that we have intentionally gone after, but over the years, it's something that we have found ourselves uniquely able to provide guidance and understanding and have grown very fond of because it's a great thing to kind of help you and relate. So now the scope. So now we're going to walk you through how we are going to approach this project and which parts of the project we will be asking you for your feedback on, which should really be everything, but just how that'll kind of play out in the deliverables that will come from us to have you review and what those things will look like and what the intentions of each step is to be. So this is pretty simplified, but this is basically what we're doing. We are going to collect information, we're going to analyze that information, we're going to implement strategies, or we're going to come up with strategies and recommendations to implement what we've come up with to address the issues, and then we'll document everything. And throughout this entire project, there will be community engagement, so you will be hearing from us continuously for the next 9 months. I apologize, we're going to get annoying, but thank you for being here. And project management is just our housekeeping, making sure that we have everything recorded, everything documented, meeting minutes, notes, people that we need to talk to, interviews, recordings, and all. So first one, project management. Again, this is our housekeeping task more so. And this is also where we would like to give you what our idea of your responsibilities and how we think that your role will be strategic to this process. So we're asking you to be in attendance, which you are, because you're here, so thanks for that. If there's anyone that's not here, please get back to them and say, hey, we need you at every meeting. We need you to be able to chip in whenever you can. We know this is outside of your normal business hours and your lives, so thank you for taking the time. Participation, just being free and open and giving in any type of way, your time, your information, anything that you think will be a benefit to us and to your community for this project. Feedback, anytime we kind of give you some information, just give us your true thoughts and feelings, and reviewing, because a lot of this will be visual, data, anything that you see we have, you say, well, that sounds like my community, but that doesn't sound like my community. Just kind of giving us that guidance and outreach. And this is really what our really big ask of you. Please reach out to your neighbors, reach out to your colleagues, reach out to people that you know are in the community that need to be a part of this. We will try our best to have outreach, to do outreach, but we will rely on you because you know your community better than us. So knocking on your neighbors' doors, if we have flyers or emails, text, sending them to them, say, hey, we have a community meeting coming up. We really need you to be there. That's going to be the biggest help that you can give us and yourselves for this project to be successful, is getting the word out and making sure you talk to people again and again and again and again. Even if they don't want to come the first time, please bug them again about it, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. But with project management, we will have conference calls, of course, keeping in touch with the client, the city, bi-monthly steering committee meetings. We'll be coming back to you every other month. And just the neighborhood tour, which we did today, and probably do again when we come back next time, because we really want to if we didn't talk to you today, but you want to see something next time we come back, you want to point something out, let us know. Community engagement. So this task is telling us how we're going to communicate and interact with you and your community. So we would need to know, who do we need to talk to? Is it just residents? Is it business owners? Is there a student population here? Is there a senior population here? We need to know all the different players and people in your community that make up your community, because not everyone's ideas or needs or wants are different. So in order to have the most holistic plan, we need to be able to talk to everybody. So we just, if we come back every time and we just talk to the same people and we're leaving people out, that's not going to be beneficial in the long run. Engagement plan, what works best? What is the best way to engage the community? Is it going to be virtual? Is it going to be in-person meetings? Is it surveys? Is it games? Is it the time that we meet? Is it better to meet midday, later? Is this a good time or something where is weekend better when more people are off? You need to know those things. Location, here, do people have an issue coming downtown or coming to the city? Or should it be in the community? Would that be a better place? Should it be at one of the churches? Or should it be outdoors at a street festival or something to that nature, once street festivals come back? Marketing, the best way of getting the word out, again, is that going to be flyers, text message, emails? And we need to have continued participation. This is going to run for the next 9 months, but we need you all, and we need the neighborhoods to be engaged. We can't start off strong and then get toward the end and kind of lose the steam. So what is the best way to keep people engaged and attentive and active throughout this entire process? And that's what our community engagement plan and outreach guide will kind of lay out, and you all will be able to see that over the next few months as we create it. And we'll also have stakeholder meetings and public meetings and civic engagement recommendations, which will be after this plan is done. How do we help the client keep engagement up in your community? So it's not just a plan for now. Then a year from now, you're not hearing anything from anybody. So how do you keep that engagement up over the years going forward? Then we'll collect. So this is what we've started already. The collection phase is really just kind of looking at the hard numbers. We'll look at census data. We'll look at permits, the number of permits that have been in your community lately, which we know is a lot. There's a lot of construction going on. Look at income levels, demographics of racial, education, vacant lots, the status of the lot, whether it's a new build or older home, Any problem properties, if there have been accidents on certain intersections, that'll identify maybe there's an issue with traffic or congestion or crossing for pedestrians, any of that. And that will help us create a neighborhood profile, which is sort of a vague way of saying, okay, this neighborhood looks like this, and maybe it'll help us see other neighborhoods that are similar to you, and maybe give ideas of how there may be some strategies or recommendations out there that can relate to you and the issues that you have in your community. Review of previous plans, we've already begun that process. We looked at plans all the way back, I think, for this one is maybe 68, but recently the downtown update, the one that the University of Texas did, I believe in 2019, for TRG displacement, and a couple others. Existing conditions, which we started today, we rode around, looked at the conditions of the properties, the streets, the intersections, anything like that. Historic and cultural preservation, we know we have a lot of historic churches in the community. We have the Shotgun House. If looking at any other historical structures and or people and events that have happened in the community, we'll look at that and create a running list of assessments. Policy review, policies that the city, state, or other programs in the area that may have that are currently available that could assist in whatever the outcomes we decide, you all decide, help us decide are needed. And then transportation and mobility. You know, there's a thing about speeding coming through the community. There's issues with parking, with downtown and events and that sort. So looking at all those existing issues, problems, or opportunities and kind of just collecting that data. And then we'll analyze. So at that point, we'll be pulling a lot of information that we've heard from you all in these interviews, in the steering committee. When we have our community meetings, we'll take all that generated information from you and then analyze it against the information that we've collected through the data collection. And that will help because a lot of times the numbers don't tell the whole story. One, it could be wrong about the census. Not everyone fills out the census. It may say, you know, everyone in this area is a renter. That might not be the case. Some people might not be filling out their census to say they're a homeowner. It may say everyone is below the age of this. You may have a population that says, you know what, we don't feel comfortable filling out census, so they might be showing the actual age of the demographic that's in the community. So we weigh the weigh the data that we collect versus what we're hearing from our community participation surveys and interviews. And we start to look for any trends to see what those issues may be or, you know, that are not showing up in other ways. So we'll have a market research scan, which will look at retail and housing options, gaps, where there's like be more affordable housing, less luxury housing, or vice versa. We'll look at the neighborhood vulnerability analysis, which is looking at how vulnerable is a neighborhood to catastrophic events, whether it be man-made or social impacts or anything like that. Decision-making matrix tool, that'll be a way for you to be transparency, way for you to see and make decisions on how certain recommendations should happen or certain strategic implementation should happen. So if you have a certain number of, you say you have an area that may be okay for development, but another area that's not because you have more homeowners. So if you build over here, there may be a greater chance of displacement, but you have more land over here, so it may not impact those as much. So that decision-making matrix tool will be a way of helping you all see how decisions are made in real time when we get to there. Historic cultural assessment and preservation, how do you preserve these historic landmarks and stories and cultures of your community? Should it be a walking art trail? Should it be funds that need to be found to preserve homes or structures or churches? We'll give recommendations for that. Land use and urban design. We know that new homes are being built in the community don't exactly reflect the community, so should there be some design standards or a guide for how, you know, homes in this area should be built going forward, or renovations? Land use, should there be an area in the community that allows for different types of homes or different types of development that may aid in affordable housing, or, you know, creating an area where there can be growth for retail or commercial that's not in the middle of the neighborhood or encroaching on the neighborhood. And then transportation concepts, speed humps, maybe intersection changes, whatever those recommendations we may find. This will be the analysis phase where we start to generate those recommendations. And then implement. So we have these ideas, we see what there can be done, we come up with some strategies. How do we get those strategies implemented? This is where we decide, we start breaking out the partners that need to be done, how much it'll cost, a financial analysis of what these different recommendations will cost in order to implement, and who needs to be at the table to assist in implementing those recommendations. Is it something that just the city can do? Or is it something that the neighborhood really needs to take ownership of? Or do you need federal funds or state or nonprofits? Who are the partners? Who are the people? How long will it take? And with that, you start to strategize what is most doable or most important. So what maybe takes a little bit longer or can be prioritized down the line. So that will come with the community retention strategy, which identifies ways to help people stay in the community so you can not lose your legacy residents and help people stay. Neighborhood preservation plan, your policy and regulatory recommendations, funding and financial strategies, as I said, and then a feasibility model and your 5-year implementation, which really lines it up for the next few years. And as that, we'll document. So, of course, everything will be documented. The goal for this is definitely to get it adopted by City Council. And so this will be our documentation that will be passed out to you, to the community, so you will be able to take ownership of this, and when things down the line happen, you can say, well, this plan that we did and that we built says X, Y, and Z. So when things come up, developments or other obstacles or issues that may face you in the future, you have something to go back to, and it's like, well, that's not aligning with the plan that we wrote and we designed. And this is the phase where we kind of put that together and say, hey, what do you think? And with that, the timeline. We will be with you for the next 9 months, as I said, and we have different points within that timeline where we'll be coming back to the community and having input. So we're here in May, we have our project kickoff and our first steering committee meeting with you. We'll be coming back between now and June. In June, we'll have our first community-wide meeting. So when we do that collection phase, we'll be coming back in June to say, hey, this is what we got, this is what we found out. Here are all the data points and the details and the community profile. But you'll see it before we have the community meeting. So anytime we're about to present something to the community at large, we'll bring it to you first. And then you'll give us that feedback and you'll kind of tell us what's going on. And then, from there we can massage it or, take your remarks and see what can be done about it, if anything needs to be done. And then we'll meet with the community, because you're kind of our filter and our eyes on the ground, I should say. We're new to the community, we're kind of like looking at things from a certain level, so we need you to kind of adjust our lenses if need be. In June, we'll continue to do our collection. We'll start analyzing in October, implementation by December, and by January of 2022, we should have our documentation done, and you all should be so happy and excited because you're about to say, oh, we got to do it. So that's when you have it. And with that, our initial discovery. So this is what we've done so far. So we've started reviewing our previous plans, and we have looked at the urban renewal plan for South San Gabriel area that was done in '68. The Parks Master Plan was 2009. Your citizen participation plan, have an overall transportation plan, the downtown master plan, the tools for preventing displacement, which we mentioned earlier, for the Track Ridge Grasshopper, Georgetown 2030 update, which is still ongoing, and the Track Ridge Grasshoppers plan survey, which was done last year. So we've reviewed all these plans and we've looked at the recommendations, the concerns, the issues that kind of showed up in each one. And out of those, we have found that these are the similarities. Protecting existing residents is a high priority. It was mentioned in almost everything. Preserving the cultural character of the neighborhood, traffic and parking is a concern, and the rising property taxes, which we've also heard a lot about too. A lot of these are the same things we've heard on a neighborhood tour and any of the stakeholder interviews that we've been doing so far with residents from the TRG neighborhood. So we're going to take a quick little break, allow you to get some water, use the restroom if you need to, and then we have a couple activities. If you all are ready, we can move right into it. But if you like to take a little, if y'all ready, we're ready to keep it rolling. You good? You ready?
Questions.
Oh, yeah, questions. No, Nate, so does anyone have any questions about the scope or anything that we've said so far?
So,
Yeah, okay, go.
So the first one, on the timeline that you showed,
Mm-hmm.
we still have to, like, if we were to add that to our calendar, we still have to add in our bi-monthly meetings, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they have not been scheduled yet, but anytime, once we get, close to those dates, we'll let you know.
Gotcha. And then my second question, you said the goal is to get adopted by city council.
Mm-hmm.
So when, I don't know the proper terminology, but when you take the project or the scope back to city council, can they reject the whole plan, or are they voting on bits and pieces of the plan?
so generally, the way the process works is that when, once the plan is completed, we will work with the planning director, with the staff, to get the plan kind of teed up to be introduced to city council. They may want to introduce it through the district council person, or they may want, just depending on the city manager may want to introduce it to council for adoption. So what we try to do is that throughout the process of the plan, we are keeping the planning director is keeping the city manager is keeping the mayor, and the city council is kind of informed about the recommendations in the plan. And so the idea is that when the plan is introduced to council, it will be adopted in its entirety.
Okay.
And that's generally the case. I mean, obviously there's no wood around here, but I can't remember any plan that we've done that was adopted in parts. It may be questions that come up that we have an opportunity to go before council and answer those questions. But generally, it's adopted in its entirety.
Okay. Thank you.
You have anything to that?
I would just add that I agree with everything that Mr. Wells has said. What we'll also be doing is it's very customary for us to go during a workshop session and to have a conversation with council and say, are we on the right track? And they'll say yes, or they'll say, we've got some questions we need to send back to the consultants. And so that's very customary. And what that helps us do is to address those questions early rather than at the end.
Thank you.
I've got a few questions, and one is about the timeline that you displayed. Will we get a copy of that in some fashion so we have a visual of what this
Will look like
9-month process will look like?
We can share the presentation with the steering committee.
Okay. And I guess these questions are maybe related to the activities that will occur. One example is that there is currently a public spaces survey being conducted by the city, which includes areas in close proximity to this library. Martin Luther King Street is, I think, to my left here. And while it may not be in the TRG boundaries, it is a part of the neighborhood.
Right.
When you think about Martin Luther King Street being a major, I would say, thoroughfare into that neighborhood. So, including that in your review of studies will be important, because I think there will likely be some discussions about some of the proposals that are coming from that survey. Does that make sense?
No, that's great, yeah.
Okay. The other question that I have, is about the ongoing development. Now, when we drove around today, you saw some recently constructed homes, and we saw demolition of an area where there were 2 houses previously. I mean, there's ongoing building while we're creating a plan and developing policies. How do those interfaces occur, or do they occur?
I think that's a little tough, because one, in order to stop anything, that's not something our plan could, we can give recommendations, but even that, for it to be adopted, and it's gonna take time. I think that will really lie with the city, to decide, how do we, address ongoing development during this phase. But I'm not really sure there's anything that our plan can do in the interim while it's being done.
First of all, I think that's a very good question, and I would be less than honest if it didn't cross my mind when we saw it, but it's very difficult to manage. Planning by its very nature is, even though 9 months to a year seems like a long time, in the world of planning, that's a blink. So I think it's the safer way to look at this is to look at this plan that will kind of address the longer continuum of growth and development that will be occurring in and around the TRG neighborhood, than anything that could happen where we would be able to manage what's currently occurring. That would be, while that may not be my preference, I think that's the more likely scenario. We would be, as part of the conversations that we're having with a whole range of people that have an interest and or knowledge or impacted, we would be happy to talk to the builders and developers to kind of get a sense as to what they're doing and give them a sense as to what we're doing. That may not change anything in terms of what the plans are, but it would make they're knowledgeable of the concerns that are being raised by you as constituents, and that those concerns are being looked at in the context of a plan.
Right.
And so we can do that, but I wouldn't want to make any representations that there's anything that we're going to be able to do that would stop what's currently going on in the short term.
Okay, that's helpful. And I did make a note here in terms of the outreach, including not only the residents, but those builders, those folks who are coming in and having an impact on the neighborhood.
All right, yeah.
So let me say something and I've already mentioned to Carter that we want to be out of here at 7:30. So I hate to keep interrupting him, but as far as outreach is concerned, we can do all that we can, and we can work with the city to help with the outreach. But what we do with the outreach pales in comparison to what you can do as residents and people who live in the community and are trusted by the neighborhood in general. When we have these public meetings, these are steering committee meetings. When we have these public meetings, we should have great turnouts. We should have a lot of people there, and sometimes those people are people who want to be aggressive about their support of the plan. Sometimes there may be people there who want to be aggressive against the plan. That's okay. I mean, I would, if I was living in a community and going through this process, I would invite the developers to come to the public meetings. I really would, because I want them to kind of get a sense of what are some of the concerns that are being raised. But I think just from being able to convey your anxiety about what's happening in your community, the more people that show up at a public meeting, the better off we're going to be. Because at the end of the day, somebody was asking about the council. At the end of the day, we are going to want to be able to say to city council, throughout this process, we had a lot of support. We had a lot of input, and that input is reflected in the plan. You don't want to have it at the end of the day to say, well, I see you guys had a public meeting, and only 15 people showed up. We don't want to have that. So we're going to actually be, just as you're relying on us, we're going to be very reliant on you to make sure when we have these public meetings, we have a good turnout. you'll have plenty of notice, you'll have whatever support you need, but in terms of getting to people and to residents and neighborhoods and getting them to come to the meeting to learn about what's going on, that's critically important.
Yes, sir.
I want to kind of add to Mr. Swain or ask a question that once this is adopted, permits that are currently ongoing, and they haven't been approved, are they going to be forced to abide by our new adoption?
Well, it takes a couple more steps. In the plan, if it's adopted by council, that's the council saying, we've seen this plan, we reviewed it, we know this is what the community wants, and this comes with recommendations. That's them acknowledging, okay, we want to work to implement these recommendations because we adopted this plan. Now, if one of those recommendations is a change in how permitting is done for the neighborhood, how zoning is looked at in the neighborhood, then we would have to implement those recommendations. And when you go to the council and say, hey, you adopted this plan and it had these recommendations, when are you going to act on it? It gives you that teeth, that kind of foundation to say, okay, well, we're not seeing any changes, and we should be seeing changes because this recommendation was in this plan and you adopted it. So that's kind of giving you that it's not a legal document, but it's giving you that stick to say, hey, you did this. Now, what do I see? Where can I see some changes? And then that begins the implementation process based on the recommendations that they adopted in the plan.
So I'm going to give you a good example. I'm going to give you an example, and then I'm going to give you a lot. Okay. The example is we did I think Florence, South Carolina was one of the examples that brought it forward. So part of that one of the recommendations in the plan was that it was a recommendation that the city consider adopting something called rental registration. This was the communities, the neighborhoods that we were working in. A lot of the single-family homes were being converted to rental, and it was just devastating the neighborhood. And so, one of the strategies that we explored was, maybe you should consider the property owner registering that rental property with you. At least that way you know who the property owner is. You can arrange to have an annual inspection of their rental property. This gives you an opportunity to take a look at, this person really isn't doing all they could do to keep this property up. So we did that plan in 2000. I think it was adopted by council in 2000 and I'm going to say 15. They passed a they passed a legislation to enact a rental registration program last year. It was debated by council for 3 or 4 years. But so the philosophy is, if you never have a plan, that will never happen. If you do have a plan, it's not a guarantee it will happen, but it sets in motion a platform for it to occur. And that's the best way that I would look at a plan. You can guarantee it won't happen without a plan. But if you do have a plan, then you have a platform for someone like Sophia or Susan or Nate to kind of remind council that this is an issue. Here's how it was addressed in the plan. It's been adopted. Let's look at some ways to kind of advance it. So it took them 4 years to do that. But it would have never happened without the plan.
I just want to say real quick, just to piggyback off of that. So, not to challenge y'all's knowledge, but I don't know if y'all been paying attention to city council meetings, but at the last meeting or workshop, if I'm not correct, but there was discussion about short-term rentals, and that was voted against. And then before that, maybe a year ago, there was a request for a moratorium, and then that was shot down. So there's things that have been trying to get in progress for the neighborhood, but it gets shut down by other city council representatives, or it doesn't have the support.
Well, that's the reason why I mentioned this rental registration.
That was part of that.
That's exactly why I mentioned that. you know, I wasn't gonna tell the story, but when that plan came up for adoption, the city manager asked me to come up to Mars, and, so I came in the council chambers. I said, boy, sure was a lot of people here today. I said, what's going on? He said, it's you. He said, that recommendation, he said, just brought people out of the woodwork. And, for the first half of that council meeting, the people who were opposed to that particular provision of the plan, I mean, it was just like one after another saying, no, we can't do this, this is why we can't do it. I asked the city manager, I said, do you want me to say something? He said, no, I got it covered. And so after they got all of that, he started asking people like yourselves to come up and give your opinion. And you saw the whole council demeanor change. And that piece of and that council adopted the plan on that day 9-0. Now, if you would have been there with me and saw all the people who were coming up to that mic talking about the plan, you would have said, it is no way this plan is going to be adopted today. But at the end of the day, council adopted it 9-0, and they did it on the strength of the community saying, we want this plan for our neighborhood. You know, again, that's back to my point earlier. If you don't have a plan, I can guarantee you nothing will happen. If you do have a plan, it gives you a platform for something to happen. And that's just, you know, that's probably the level, that's to the extent of the commitment that we can make to you. But without a plan, it's, you know, a lot of this discussion is just dead. That would be my opinion.
This, to us, is old soup warmed over. We've had meetings, not in this context, but we've had meetings and meetings over years and years. We have planning and zoning, we have park, we have preservation committees. There has been no way that we could get a moratorium. There's no way to block any kind of builder that's building. So when I look at that continuum, and you say, well, it's going to take 20 to 22, then it's like, okay, Paulette, turn your head from what's coming in your neighborhood, because 2 houses down, the guy's going to build, there's cars on. So it's like, what's going to happen until 2022? It's like no one has any control. The city won't do anything. The council turns their head, and all of the other organizations, it's just us that keep saying, who do we talk to block some of the buildings? What's going to happen in the course of a year before we get to our new plan that we can possibly implement?
You know, that's a very good point. I mean, I wish I could say, here's what we can do to stop that right now. But I think that would be very misleading, to be perfectly honest. I mean, we don't have anything, there's nothing that we could do as part of our work that short of the meetings, the more work we do in this planning process and the more front and center that work is, the more, the bigger platform that you have. Now, you know, can you change somebody's intent during the planning process? I'm not sure, but what you can do is to make sure that all parties know, whether it's a city council person or a developer, that we're concerned about this. And we want to try to figure out a way to address it, and we're in a process that, at the end of the day, is going to make recommendations. It's easier for you to be a part of that than for you to say, you know, I don't care, I'm not going to pay attention to it. But, you know, I go back to what I said before, and I say this all the time, and I say it everywhere we go. What we sometimes forget is that this situation, whatever it is that we're in now, and you've heard this, I'm sure, 100 times, it didn't happen overnight. It's not going to be corrected overnight. And so we have to figure out a process, even though it may not stop the situation where it is now. We got to figure out a process that in the long run, we are able to manage this. And you know, some people are going to be, it's going to be painful between now and the time this gets adopted and any time after that. But we have to go through this process, and that process may not include being able to stop somebody in their tracks in order to get from where we are now to where we need to be.
And I want to add to that, not only this community, I've lived here all my life, and how many years have I heard about San Jose flooding and the water situation in that community, and nothing's been done. So it's segments of this community that everybody turns their head and nothing is done. And one of our former councilman, Mayor Calisto, can add to that. Am I right, Mayor? Am I?
I just wanna say, and it's not that I'm defending anybody, but, you know, we have to go through this process. It's gonna take a while.
Sure.
And, it's growing pains because the city is growing. And yesterday you mentioned about, we had a lot of people aging late in San Jose. Well, there are like 2 or 3 generations, maybe 4 in houses there. So you have to wait maybe 100 years before these people die, okay? But in the course of that, I applaud the council, even though, you know, maybe some of them were begrudging but I applaud also the city staff that they were willing to take this project on, because I'm sure that it's painful. But they wanted to have something, you know, and that is the long-range planner, the new guy, and the developers, well, it's a good idea to bring all of these people together and voice all of those, you know, opinions. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're the ones who are living and trying to, we're being very resilient, I feel, the residents here in Georgetown. And it's gonna take, council people who are in agreement with this. And right now, I'm hopeful that your new representative will, sign on to this and, will do what you can to, you know, get it.
I think, I'm sorry. I think something that we really want to, that can possibly help, or something that we want to work toward, is finding a way to reach these parties and let them know that this plan will be beneficial for them too. And not saying it will, and this is very much wishful hope thinking, but if we're able to talk to them, bring the developer to the table, bring the other council members to the table, and have a way of saying, hey, when we get this plan in place, it will not only enhance our community, but it'll be better for you too. So figuring out a way of kind of putting the notion out there that this is going to be better for the city and for your business, whatever it may be, if you give us this time, some, you know, maybe just, or listen to us or just hear us out. Maybe you won't stop right away, but maybe it'll change the way you approach issues in the future. I think that's something that we can start to have that conversation about now, and maybe that will assist in the long run. Like, I want to say maybe it'll slow them down, but I ain't say that. But you know,
there are communities all over the country that are experiencing the same thing that you're experiencing. And you know, it's interesting how some of the neighborhoods of color around the country, you know, people talked about them for years, and all of a sudden they're prime real estate. You know, so it's a big problem, but I think at the end of the day, you'll be surprised at, your leverage as a neighborhood. I mean, I've seen it happen, and I've seen it happen a lot, where, as you gain more information about how you can protect your neighborhood, and be able to articulate that or voice that in a different way. And this process is going to give you that tool. And it's going to give the the planning department and the city manager, it's going to give them a similar tool to work with. It's not a magic bullet, but it is necessary. It is, I mean, this is just not something that you can have a conversation about and expect it to change. You have to have something to work with. And so your tool, your first tool is this plan. That's your first tool. If that plan can get adopted, that gives everybody concerned a resource to be able to reference and then to try to advance it forward. And, I can just tell you story after story where we go into neighborhoods and we have this exact same conversation because things are happening that they don't like. And at the end of the day, once they have this tool to work with, it's a difference. I mean, Carter can tell you, the neighborhood that we worked in, and this developer was so arrogant that we had a large meeting, fed people, and it was packed with residents of the neighborhood. He got up and said, "I know y'all like Jesse. I know y'all think he's a nice guy." He said, "But he's wrong on this one, and I'm not going to change what I'm going to do." He said that. Carter was right there when he said it. About 3 months later, he was in front of the zoning department for a change, and they said, "Well, what happened to the plan that you had?" The neighbor presented the plan. The developer acknowledged that, "Well, I think I kind of forgot that the plan was here." And he made significant changes in that project to accommodate the recommendations of the plan. Now, it didn't have to work out that way. A lot of times it doesn't work out that way. But if there wasn't a plan in place that articulated what he was supposed to do that he didn't do, it would have been a different outcome. One more question, and then we need to move on.
It's just a quick question. You mentioned engaging the neighborhood, and I noticed that a lot of the new residents are in love with the Nextdoor app. Is there a way that maybe city council can post, because I believe this neighborhood gets assigned to South Rock Street, so is there a way that maybe someone can go in and post, like these meetings, we're having these meetings, or any surveys that impact this particular neighborhood?
So, one of the activities we're going to do is talk about how we're going to do outreach, and that's something that we'll definitely take into consideration.
And we might need to verify with everyone, we worked with our communications team, like on the Nextdoor map.
Okay.
And we put, for the steering committee application, we put it on Nextdoor with some information about this. We didn't receive any responses outside of, it didn't seem like we received any responses from that. We didn't. Okay, so then we definitely need to double check and make sure that the ones, that's what they're called, and then put that addition.
So this part is South Rock Street, and then the other part is under the oak. Like the whole area over there is the oak.
Thank you.
So for these activities, we're asking that you pull out your phone or electronic device. It's going to be some surveys. If you do not have your phone or do not feel comfortable using electronic device, we have hard copies, and we can collect your information that way. If you need any assistance using it, then we can do that. This first exercise, though.
Does everyone have the hard copy of the questions?
We have it, if you need it, I can pass it out.
Okay.
So on your phone, if you're comfortable with it, you're just going to, and there's free Wi-Fi in the library tonight. So you're just going to type in your phone, menti.com.
Wait, where do you go to?
And go to your internet.
Okay, go to.
Yes, please, and type in menti.com. And you should see,
Got it?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hit go. Yes, sir. You're gonna type in this number, I'll read it to you. 67454414. And then hit that submit. Yes, sir. Okay. This is a free text. So you click on that and you're gonna type in your answer.
Think we're ready?
Okay, so
I'll try again, let me see.
it may be, in your settings, if you have a certain type of, if not, you can get your,
Let me try the Wi-Fi.
you see the number?
Marvin.
Shout out to the Wi-Fi.
Oh, this is here.
Yes, it's early, so yeah. Yeah, just answer it, and then just hit the submit button. So once you've typed in everything that you want, just hit the submit button and don't close the window, because there'll be more questions after that.
Put in the numbers, 6, 7, 4, 1, 4. So this first question, I'll wait for everybody good? She's good?
Jesse needs help.
I'm good.
Actually, there's a lot of younger folks last time that couldn't get it.
Look, the struggle was real.
All right, so this first question is really to get an understanding of the vision you have for your community. We want to know, what are your goals and expectations for this project? We as planners all have goals and expectations when we go into a project, but this is for your neighborhood and for your community, so we need to know, what do you want to see come out of this process? Whether that is a plan that addresses your zoning and land use, housing or design guidelines, traffic, public safety, the way the community interacts in the zoning or legislative process, policies, monies, anything of that nature.
And once again, once you submit your answer, just sit tight, because we're gonna have more questions roll in, and it'll pop up on that window.
Anybody need help?
Thank you. We got it.
We'll give you about 3 minutes. give everybody a few more minutes to respond.
See ya. Just tell, he was like,
Oh, no, I had something in and I was gonna do it.
Do you think you should?
Yeah, I said,
Has everyone? Two more.
so hit refresh.
Nope, just leave it on there. Yep. And then when we get to the next question, it'll pop right in.
Now, the next question will be,
I'm going to the movies.
Before COVID. Back in the day. And we would go in the afternoon on Friday, out at Spartanburg. So, and something good. On Fridays, I roller skate. I roller skate. I can't skate. I go in, round. And then one lap around the court and I'm sweating. Good.
One word.
Couple of them, because you did a little bit of surveying, we're gonna focus on outreach and engagement.
yep.
No, it's actually harder.
So the next activity we have is we're going to do a SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis is a framework that we use to identify your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the community. So we have a couple that we've identified. Strengths and weaknesses are of internal origin, so it's something that's within the community or a characteristic that's within your neighborhood. And external origins for your opportunities and threats are things that are coming from outside your community or with outside of your intrinsic values. So we have a couple examples. For internal origin that's beneficial, a strength, Blue Hole Park. It's an amenity, it's part of your community, it's something that is a strength to you and your community. It has history and heritage in it. Something that's internal origin, but it's harmful, traffic and parking. Your adjacency to downtown, the development that is happening, because you're adjacent, you tend to have a traffic and parking issue by nature because of your location to downtown. External opportunity. It's beneficial, your access to I-35. Living there is opportunity because you have easy access to transportation into other parts of the city and to downtown and to other destinations. Your access is an opportunity to, is a benefit to the community and opportunity to grow. A threat, encroaching development, which also transportation could be a threat also. Because it seems as a benefit is why people want to come so bad, because you're close to access. We know you're adjacent to Austin, so a lot of people tend to say, "Oh, this is great, in and out," to get to where they're going. But encroaching development is outside of your community, and it's a threat to bring additional pressures onto your community as far as pricing, development, and different types of character housing types. So these are examples. So what are some strengths of your community? It doesn't necessarily have to be something that's that's tangible. It can be the tight-knitness, the generations of families that are found in your community, the culture or what's the word I want to say, not commune, but your community. The tight-knitness of your community is a strength. So what are some ideas or strengths that you believe are of TRG?
Preservation.
History and preservation. What has been preserved of the history? What are some other strengths?
Churches,
Churches.
A willingness to work together, unity.
The strength of the community, willingness to work together in unity as all opportunities,
Yes.
strengths rather.
Yes.
My street, we have like really friendly neighbors where everybody knows everybody.
Neighbors.
That's a diverse neighborhood.
Yeah, that's true too. My street's very diverse.
Also, just say that our location is,
Yes.
That's it.
The location might be a strength and it may be a threat.
Yes.
yeah, a strength for,
For the residents.
well, a strength for the residents, but not
Right.
only for the residents, for the city,
Yes.
who, and other people who want the area.
That's.
And it's also a threat for the people that live in the city.
Exactly. Any weaknesses?
Lack of communication.
Between neighbors or between?
Just the neighborhood as a whole, not necessarily neighbors, but the neighborhood as a whole.
Well, like when you communicate, who are you communicating to there is the lack? Is it between the community and the city? Or is it like the neighbors aren't involved because there's no communication between each other? So
Second one, of one another, yeah, or both.
both.
yeah.
I see a weakness of, lack of overall towards inclusivity, where you don't see, big events that are diverse. Meaning vendors, meaning schools, we don't see the totality of diversity overall.
What about some opportunities? I know when I rode the neighborhood today, the celebration of the neighborhood's, African-American history really seemed like a tremendous opportunity.
The longevity of historic events like Juneteenth. This is the 69th.
Celebration of heritage and culture.
Exactly, because like MLK marches, those kinds of things create a diverse community.
I guess another way to,
Also Highway 29. Oh, gosh.
I think another,
For an opportunity?
yeah,
Opportunity.
Yeah, that's opportunity.
That university.
University Avenue, yeah.
I go that way at 5 o'clock. I take Leander. I go up to, by the hospital, and then I get on 35 there.
Just for clarification, is it opportunity or is it a strength
It's just an opportunity.
to build off of?
No, wait. I forgot my, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, because I mean.
No, I have memory issues. I'm sorry, I forgot last time.
No.
It's too young to be.
Another conversation going about Cinco de Mayo, is that still building off celebrating?
Well, see, that's what I was asking for. Years ago, they were around the square dancing. She said that doesn't happen anymore.
It's more on the 16th, September 16th.
September 16th?
Cinco de Mayo is more American.
Oh, okay, so they, September 16th. You know how it is.
Oh, no.
Some more opportunities. So we have celebration of heritage. Is there opportunity in,
There's opportunity in the park, which is Chautauqua Park,
Oh, yeah.
to bring the community closer together.
say that one more time, which part?
Chautauqua Park.
That's the one, we passed that one today.
And even enhancing the park.
Somebody needs to use this barbecue pit. Man, I hear you.
I'll do it.
But it seems like, that wasn't even.
About 30 years ago, but it was.
Yeah.
I think another strength is how the city has, over the years, made it available. Like, we've always had our Juneteenth at the community center, so they've opened up a lot of avenues for it. Southwestern University, we had our first Black History banquet, nearly 300 people. So the city as well as the university has
Community partners and things like.
community
Collaboration.
Collaboration.
I would see another strength as the GCCMA, organization, which oversees the Shotgun House and the, Willie Hall Center, and also sponsors GCCMA. You have it, okay.
I think that's an opportunity to, as well as a strength. And the reason why I say that, I think it's a strength because of what it's done with the Shotgun House and other things. But I think it's an opportunity to grow that organization to potentially be able to take on more projects like that. We see that as an opportunity.
That's for the next president.
What?
You said that's for the next president.
Yeah.
I heard you say that before.
Is there any opportunity, I know we worry about housing and prices, is there any opportunity for, affordable infill that is, reflective of the community, like similar architectural styles? When we went around today, I know a lot of the homes that were built were doing urban renewal and by HUD, but it creates a fabric, it creates a look. With some, is there opportunity to build off of that cohesive? community? I know you have a lot of stuff coming in, but is that something you'd like to see?
I would love to see low-income housing, but,
Quality affordable housing?
or even like, I know something that was passed recently, which we don't have much of in Georgetown, is work subsidy housing. And even partnerships with, Habitat for Humanity.
They built a lot of.
We have one,
They do have partnerships with
but more in this area,
yeah,
more in this neighborhood.
they're doing it. Well,
They're
Well-
doing one on Leander.
Well, the land is a problem in terms of habitat, the expense.
With, in finding the partners and the logistics behind it would be something, but, a land trust.
Right,
Something that could be hold affordable housing, or hold the land within the community affordable, and then that can be passed on from buyer to buyer. Could that be something you
Can you explain the land trust, please?
So a land trust is an organization that will purchase land, and they withhold the value of the land within the organization. So anything that is built within the land, the person who is purchasing that home is only paying for the improvement, not the land. So whenever whoever owns that home, just the home, sells it, the next person only pays for the improvement and not the land, and that's the way you pass on the affordability to the next home buyer. So, in some cities, I believe it's somewhere in Massachusetts, they have an organization set up that they get the first right of refusal. So if a home or entity is affordable, when it goes to sale, they get to be the first person to, they will say, we'll buy it or we won't buy it. When they buy it, their charter is to make sure it stays affordable, and they pass it on to the next person, so they hold the land. That could be something that could be opportunity for you, the city, or a nonprofit or something to that nature.
Yeah, yeah.
As long as, I think most land trusts, Mr. Wiles, I don't know, depends
Yeah.
on how long that charter says they'll keep it.
Yeah, generally it's, the idea is to give some longevity to affordability, so it's not, it may go 50 years, or it could go longer than that. But that's, that's something that we certainly, can explore in terms of, how it potentially would apply. And vacant land is developed, it seems to work better in a high-cost environment like you are approaching. And that's why you see it more in the Northeast where land cost is extremely high. Because the land cost generally makes up about 25% of the total cost of development. And so, if you don't have to pass that through to a purchaser, it tends to be able to save you some.
So a partnership with an organization like Habitat for Humanity that makes the improvements,
Is that saying that's one of the partners that would?
that could be a partner.
I don't know if land.
I think it's much too early to get into the details of how it would work.
Okay.
I think we're just trying to say that, when you start looking at, housing affordability, the ideal scenario is to try to put something in place that will make sure that this affordability lasts for a long time,
Right.
beyond 20 years. I mean, I know in many of our lifetimes, you see somebody's built something and it had a stipulation that it had to stay affordable, but it says 20 years, and you say, oh, that's a long time. Next thing you look up, that 20 years is gone, and that property is no longer affordable. But the property's still here, but the elements that would keep it affordable are no longer there. So, you want to try to look at strategies that would introduce affordability into the neighborhood. You the idea is to, how can we do it in such a way that, one, doesn't impede just the whole notion of free enterprise, and that is people buy and sell property all the time. But if we can do it in such a way where there's a level of affordability that always goes and transfer from one property owner to another property owner, that's the ideal scenario.
I think, interrelated threats, one is the loss of youth, of young adults from, the neighborhood, and related to that is the lack of, employment opportunities.
Yeah, that's workforce.
Yeah, workforce development. And providing a living wage.
Any other threats? We have some great opportunities, and that's really good.
Well, I mean, I think we talked at length about one threat, and that's the current development that's occurring in the area. That, I think, at least I heard that as a threat.
Yeah. So,
If they want, they can do another, what they want on something to do.
any others?
One threat is the, increasing homeless population that's along the ridge.
And to tie in with what Carlos just said, as it increases, I think the city needs to do something about it because you allow them to reside in the park area and sleep there. Yet you charge us $75 for the pavilion, but they're using it in housing, and that's occurring right now.
You said they were kids?
Well, no, he's
Safety dress.
Oh, I thought I heard kids.
Yeah, for the safety.
Okay, any others? We got a couple more exercises.
Ooh, the upcoming, the moving of HEB.
HEB is moving.
Yeah, it's gonna be moved to Wolf Ranch, Wolf Lakes, I believe.
That's the only grocery store in the area?
This area.
Well, Aldi will be the next closest, but.
And with that is a major traffic problem. The 29 is already the largest in traffic problems right now. You're gonna move it across in the most congested area of all. I won't be able to go to the grocery, well, most of us won't be able to go to the grocery store until midnight because we won't be able to get in. And if there's a wreck, it's gonna block everything else. Traffic moving around.
So there's a traffic problem with Scenic Drive.
No, with
I think, well,
29.
minimal.
Oh,
South Avenue University.
So what's gonna happen with the current HEB?
We haven't said.
There's lots of
more that we can have ice cream. Okay.
okay. I think we got some good ones. For this next exercise, I think the last two, we're gonna go back to your phone. This is just a quick ranking, I'm sorry. This next one, what are your goals for successful outreach and community engagement? How would you measure a successful outreach and community engagement for this project? Is it the number of residents that are reached? Is it the number of surveys that are received? Or is it how we do the project? Is it being in person? Is it the type of engagement that we do, whether they be focus groups here in the library or in the home or in the community? How would you say they did everything they could and they reached the entire neighborhood, or they reached as much as they could? How would you measure successful engagement and outreach for this project? What would make you feel like everything was done in its power to reach as many people as possible? and they had their chance to have input. And we'll do 3 minutes. We have one question that we really want to get your input on.
If it goes weird, does that affect you? Okay, so I can keep going? Okay.
You have 64 characters.
Okay, thank you.
Is it the type of people we're bringing to the table? Should it be just residents? I know we spoke earlier to length about bringing the developers to the table, bringing council to the table, bringing the churches, the schools, the business, whole community, everybody. Flyers, mailers, social media, calls, town hall, visits. Should we be going door to door to talk to residents?
Yes.
All right, 30% of resident management, all meetings. Gotcha.
Yeah, that's a big thing. We spend so much time doing media, we don't look up from our phones anymore. And, you know, you don't get to know somebody until you actually with them.
Yes, I agree.
I like what you submitted, Kathy.
How'd you know that was me?
Huh? It's mine. I don't know it was you.
Thing okay?
Satisfactory response from residents that had opportunity to participate.
We're not, if this doesn't pop up before we turn the screen, please either write it down, because we want to talk to you about, your neighborhood. That'll be the next.
Big boundaries?
Yes. All right. Yeah.
Everybody else still typing? I think we got one more.
Got one more? All right. So with this, we have two boundaries that we have understood. So we have two boundaries that we've come to know for the TRG neighborhood. The initial survey that was done in 2019, the boundary came down to 19th Street, 17th and 19th Street. And then there's another boundary that the city has heard from community members that TRG extends all the way down to Leander. So we have a quick poll on the next page. It's going to ask you what is the boundary that you identify with, and then we're going to have a conversation about that. So go to your phone. Which boundary do you identify with as TRG? 17th and 19th Street or Leander Road?
I've got a different question.
Leander Road is the large one. It's the one, should be the one, right?
Oh, okay.
Got somebody else? You already voted? And the reason we want to understand this is because when we start to do the recommendations and looking at data and collection, there's a different type of housing stock, there's a different type of neighborhood character from one part of TRG or from the lower part, southern part of TRG than the northern part. And then when we come with recommendations, we want to be able to ensure that we're addressing the right concerns for community members. And does that need to be focused or broad? And that will also have an impact on how, you know, you can, how the plan will look and the recommendations that will come with it and how much teeth they will have for certain issues and topics. Got 7. Got anyone else that hasn't voted yet? Has everyone voted? Okay. So, why, do you want to start this? Okay.
I think, we just want to get the input,
Okay.
yeah, and the input on, why.
To go there. So what history of the TRG neighborhood lends itself to reach all the way down to Leander? Because it has a little bit of a different makeup. It's not as much single family neighborhood down there as it is here next from 19th and above. So is there a history to that being part of TRG? Because we know TRG is kind of a conglomerate of three neighborhoods: the Ridge, Grasshopper, and the Track. So just give us a little insight about that.
It always follows the railroad track.
Mm-hmm.
Railroad track, and then you've got, community natives who even live in some of the housing area, like the, what is that? San Gabriel.
San Gabriel.
Some of the native residents are living in there. That's right there on Leander Road, across from the carriage place.
Okay.
And then you've got.
That's the senior facility.
The senior facility.
Okay.
And then you've got the.
Stonehaven as well.
Right, and then you've got, right there at Leander, that little untouched neighborhood.
You got a mobile home park
Mobile
area.
homes, right there. It's been there since the.
And you got a lot of small business areas as well that were native to.
Okay.
So the community kind of identifies
Encompasses
that as
Leander.
part, that area as part of the TRG neighborhood?
Right, even though it hasn't been verbatim.
Exactly.
Mhm.
All right. I guess the only thing that we may look at is going forward is if the consensus, if the neighborhoods in that portion will have the same ideas for your single family neighborhood in this area. So if we come with recommendations, if they have not been as engaged or active, will their voices be different from what you have? I know there are residents in Legacy just a little bit, they'd be a lot of the same? Okay. So when we look at protecting single-family housing or Legacy residents, the senior facility, will a majority of those neighbors and those residents in that area be the voice that comes when you try to go to council? Will it be just as loud and active as yours?
That includes Habitat as well.
out because Habitat thinks they're building
Yeah.
some duplexes out there for, that's like the only one they have left in Georgetown right now.
Yeah, over.
They're working on a, townhouse subdivision, and when I spoke to, can't remember her name, but when I spoke to her, she told me the reason it is townhouses instead of single-family homes is because of the value of the land in this area.
That's
So
probably
that was
Debbie
their
Hoffman.
option.
Debbie Hoffman, probably, she's the director.
I think so.
Yeah. So just to reiterate what Carter is saying again, is that our concern is that because the character of that area, the development area is so different than the other parts of TRG. In other words, it's got the trailer park. You have to believe that at some point that trailer park is going to be redeveloped, because it's not the highest and best use for that land. Then you have a low-income housing tax credit, which is a high-density project, and that's a completely different character than the rest of the neighborhood. And then you have the habitat development, even though that is, technically single-family, but the reason that you mentioned that they're building that, or someone mentioned they're building that because of the cost of land, is something that we saw in the Third Ward in Houston, okay? This is a single portion of the Third Ward we're working in, is a single-family detached home, but no single-family detached home is being built because of the cost of land. All the builders coming in were building townhouses. And so that's why what Carter is saying, and I'll say it in a different way, is that, and of course, we will include it if this is what you want us to do, but if you included those property owners and anyone developing in that area, they're going to have a different take on what development should look like, and than what I'm hearing this evening. And so what you don't want to do, I would think, is that you don't want to go into a room, i.e. City Hall, Council, with different versions of what you'd like to see in your neighborhood because somebody else's interest is different than yours. That would be my only concern. And we haven't talked to the people, the property owners in that area, so we really don't know what they might say. But we know what you're saying. And we know why you're saying it, and based on what you're saying, is a possibility that the development strategy for that area could be different than the rest of the TRG area.
So is it possible to have multiple?
It is very possible.
Within a geographical area? I mean, you've described, almost two distinct geographies within this Track Ridge Grasshopper area. The southern portion is different, markedly different from the northern. So
that's a very good point. It is definitely possible. It's a little more of an effort to make that distinction.
Yeah.
But you can, as long as that distinction, well, I shouldn't say it's not as long as, but what you don't want is that distinction to be cut right down the middle of a road.
Yeah.
That distinction is, whatever that distinction is, you want it to be on both sides of the street.
Yeah.
Because once obviously, that's like cutting a baby in half, right?
Yeah.
You said, well, we want this side to be low density of the street, we want this side to be high density of the street, that won't work. So you have to have some kind of transition.
So what we're gonna learn also is that, the Boys and Girls Club, I think you have here, which is in the old Carver School, is scheduled to be relocated, the Boys and Girls Club. And the Georgetown Independent School District, I understand, although this has not been confirmed yet, they are going to sell that property.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we don't know yet, I'm sorry, Ms. Taylor. But we don't know yet you know, what the zoning will be, what the use will be. I mean, that's a major piece of land in our neighborhood. And at one time, that was a park, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the Jersey part,
Mm-hmm.
and they leased it for $1 to the city or
Yeah.
whatever they.
And you got the hospital.
Now, is that in the southern portion?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's.
And you've got the hospital, on the boundary. You've got the Wesleyan,
Sale.
that's up for sale now, which may be commercial. So it's a lot of,
Yeah,
changes.
so can we, I mean, we can certainly take the different comments and questions about it, but once we do that, can you give us the opportunity to kind of see how we can best work that into the overall, approach to the plan? Would that be okay?
I think so. I think it would be wise to include, you know, that Carver area as part of this overall plan, because
It fits in the hub of the community.
absolutely.
And it's gonna affect,
So you think it would be more beneficial because you would want the plan to help recommend how that area should be developed going
Right.
forward, rather than not.
Right.
I have something to add. So, when you look at the plan on the left, it stops right at the Boys and Girls Club, correct? So, 3 things. One, it doesn't include Habitat, if I can see it correctly, I don't have my glasses.
Correct.
So, I attend Wesley Chapel, and some members of my church have expressed similar concerns to what we have. So, the concerns are the same. That church, Calvary Hill Baptist Church, formerly known as Gay Hill, that's a church that my great-grandfather, he pastored there, and he helped with urban renewal. And not just that, but many of those members that attend there, one, that church is part of Georgetown Fellowship of Churches, which is a historical organization in this community, which is the 5 predominantly black churches. So there's historical context there. And then also, many of those members live in this area. So some of them live on this part, and some of them live on the other part. And then the last thing is, I do have a family home over there, so that's another concern. And I know that my family as a whole, if you add in that property, that's 7 properties that my family has, we have concerns, so yeah.
That's great.
Definitely similar.
Yeah. Now, one thing to keep in mind, that's good information. One thing to keep in mind, though, when you first started talking, you talked about your concern about Habitat. I guess this is about what Habitat is getting ready to do.
These are homes already there.
Oh, they're already there.
Well, there's homes there, and there's also some that will be used, built within 5 years.
So with this plan on the left, if I can see correctly, I can't really see too well,
No,
but if so, right there where she's pointing, that's Candy Street. So right above it is Kelly Park, but right under it is, Candy Street, and that's where maybe
The 20.
6 or 8 homes are currently,
Oh,
but
yeah.
they're single family.
Mhm.
But their concerns are the same. And then you also leave off, if I'm not mistaken, there's a Hispanic church right there that's also left out, and they may have the same concerns.
Okay, all right,
That's what we needed to know.
yep. Thank you.
I think we're a little over time, so you have some homework. And actually, you all gave us a lot of this information just now. Asset maps. You have in front of you this very large map of TRG, and what we're going to ask you to do is identify those properties that you've spoken about tonight, churches, business, historical homes of significance, anything that you believe is an asset to your community. So you have 2 sets of dots. Some are going to be solid colors, others are going to be transparent. For the solid color ones, we want you to identify the places of worship, as you mentioned, parks and gathering spaces, community centers and schools, historic places or events. And with the translucent ones, we want you to identify issues: crime, problem properties, litter, traffic, and other issues. So if you would take these home with you, the short one is your solid, the long one is your translucent. And if you need more, we have more. And if you don't have enough and there's still more that you want to identify, just right on the map and let us know what it is.
And who would they, once they get that, who would they turn that into?
Please turn it in to Susan or Nat, and they will give it to us.
Ms. Taylor, did you hear those
When
instructions?
is this due?
We will, one hope.
I think if y'all can for next week, if by next week you can, Susan and I will Susan will touch base with you, or I will touch base with you, or Cesar will touch base with you.
Okay.
If you need us to come pick it up from your house, you can do that. If you want to text a picture to me, you can do that. If you want to drop it off with Stephanie up front, you can do that. But we'll touch base with you. I think we were going to send out the instructions, right? Because I'm going to send them out to San Jose. San Jose got the same homework, so don't let them beat you to it. Because they're eager too.
So you said one of these is translucent, that means you can see through it?
Yes,
One more time,
the translucent one, yeah.
you
You
take
can't
this
tell,
map,
it says
and if you
confirm
have on
translucent
the
to
clear
access
dots,
or.
those are the ones that you place the clear dots, what we call the translucent dots.
Just on the long strip.
You place those on the areas where you have concerns, am I correct, Carter?
Yes.
The solid colored dots, you place those on areas of community that you consider assets. And then, you can call or text or email, either Susan or Nate, and then they will,
Yeah, we don't have enough.
how to get the information to them.
Yeah, Judy will.
I mean, if you're looking at
If you would-
churches, yeah.
And if you finish them in the next 5 minutes, I guess.
Houses already.
You're working on them.
As you guys work on this, I just want to say thank you again for your time. Please remember Susan is your point of contact here. She's your project manager.
So,
And anything you need, Susan will be a great resource.
so these,
Yeah, we got pictures.
Clutter, send it?
that identifies, so that we.